Luis Enriquez co-founded Cultura Colectiva over a decade ago, turning it into one of Mexico's most influential digital media platforms. Now, as a partner at Bridge Latam, a leading venture fund focused on early-stage startups, he is backing the next generation of high-growth companies in fintech, AI, agtech, and beyond. Luis brings a unique perspective as both a founder and an investor. Today, we'll explore how he evaluates companies before product market fit, the role of WhatsApp in AI-driven commerce, the future of media and the creator economy, the biggest challenges facing founders in Latin America today, and more.
Thank you, Mac. Happy to be here.
I've always said to others and to you, you've always been super supportive of me since I moved here almost 2 years ago, and it's been a pleasure to meet you and so forth. But I think what's unique about you is your past and your background and what you've been able to do in the early stages of this ecosystem. I think there's an interesting lens that you have. Can you kind of give me the story of how you came up with Cultura Colectiva and then go from there?
Yeah, for sure. So I have a mathematical background. I have always been in love with numbers. Went to Math Olympics when I was, 7 years to 11 years old. I enjoy a lot, like solving problems in my mind for a long time. And then I naturally studied mathematics as the bachelor degree. And when I was in university, social media was starting, and Facebook, Twitter, everyone was giving, all the data from what people were posting, reactions and everything. And we were downloading this data and trying to understand social patterns or social behavior through the social media data that we got. And with this information, first we started, doing these regressions. There's a really interesting correlation between domestic violence in Mexico City and the number of holes that you have in the streets.
What?
Yeah, crazy thing. We said, and we were like super idealistic, young in the university, and we were saying like, let's go with the government and tell them that like probably you fix the road, like domestic violence can go down in these places. I mean, but then we started working with the government, and it was pretty interesting because they were like, buying us these things, but they were not, actually doing anything with information. It was okay. For me, it was not a good idea. After that, I realized that I could use the same information for predict which kind of content goes viral on social media. And so I was able to create, it was not, like really difficult algorithms. It was just downloading data into an Excel and doing some regressions or predictions. And I was able to understand which kind of things was going viral on social media and then provide information for other people to create content. We started creating content in this webpage called Cultura Colectiva. And in a couple of years, we went from, having nothing to more than 30 million unique users in our website and more than 50 million followers on social media. So it was a pretty intense growth stage. There was no VC in Mexico at that moment. So it was more, we had to, invest our own money. I had to sell my car to survive at that moment.
What was the mobile penetration like? Most of this was on the web browsers, or would you say what was the users of mobile at that point?
Oh yeah, it was around 2012. I would say it was like mobile was starting. Probably like 70% of users were coming from web and 30% mobile. So it was much more web. But then, I mean, when we started in 2012, but probably like by 2015, when we were really big, it was already like mobile most of the traffic. So yeah, that's how I started in the media space.
Yeah, and that takes its course. If I recall correctly, there hasn't been that many true media companies that have been venture backed here. So at one point, I think Dollars Capital invested in you guys, I think in late 2017 or 18. Take me through that and how you ended up saying, hey, I think I want to be on the investor side.
Yes. First, we were approached by the biggest media conglomerate in Mexico that is called Televisa. And these guys were trying to, innovate and do different things. And they put us a proposal to buy the company for $25 million. It's easy to say it this way. I was probably like 26 years old and we didn't thought about it. It was no, of course we're not accept that. And then at the same time, Dallas came and said, okay, like for the same valuation, we were going to put another 5 million on top so you can make this a bigger company. I mean, if you look at it backwards, I'll be much better financially if I have sold the company. Much better. But anyways, that got me to the VC world. We got the money from Dallas. For being completely honest, I think that first 2 years, we spent the money not so wisely, like in a lot of crazy projects. We expanded the company to the US. I think, yeah, for the US Hispanics, I went for New York for like 6 months. I think we have spent more money than the money that we have got from advertising in the US. But yeah, I mean, still, I think probably in the long term, it's gonna be a good play because like more or less like 20% of the revenue from the company comes from the US. But then I go for the whole journey as an entrepreneur. We were selling a lot of, I think, like after the Dallas investment back in 2016, if I remember correctly, it's in 2016. In 2017, we were selling around $20 million. So the company was doing pretty well. But then we got hacked by, I think I told you this story before, but we were hacked by this hacker from the US, and they exposed all our, the way that we're doing the algorithms to social media. It was the first Trump presidency, and it was like the Russian intervention into the US. We were getting in that kind of things. And when this news came to Mexico, because the first pages were in Bloomberg and in, Washington Post and New York Times, I was having calls from reporters from New York Times. I need your comments on the story. And I was like, I don't know what is happening here. And then, so after that, the news came to Mexico, and it was pretty difficult for the company. We lost around 80% of the revenue 1 year to the other. So it was super difficult times, like 3 years for getting the company back to profitability. And then the company got profitable. And I think as an entrepreneur myself, we are addicted to solving problems. When the company is profitable and things are doing more or less well, you get bored a little bit. So a lot of entrepreneurs start me asking for, okay, you should help me because of all the, crazy part or the, how to go into a difficult phase. And then they were asking me for angel checks, and I did the math, and it was like, this is super difficult. I don't know who wants to be an angel investor, because I think it's the best way to lose all your money.
They say if you want to be a good angel investor, start rich and then just get less rich. Not many people make money.
No, it's super difficult. You only hear about the survival bias story from the guy that put it on Facebook, but it was a 1 out of 1,000. So I did the numbers, and it was like I have to do like at least 40 deals. So I said that this doesn't make sense. But it makes sense if I gather a group of entrepreneurs and we start investing together.
Gotcha.
And that's when Bridge Latam was founded. It was founded by Daniel Fogel, the CEO of Bitso, Fede Ranero, that was also CEO of Kavak, Eduardo Paulsen from Ben and Frank. Anyways, we are entrepreneurs from 10 different industries, all of us leaders in our industries. We decided to invest our own money first to learn. And then we were able to raise our first fund back in 2022, $50 million.
Nice. So before we kind of get into, briefly touching on Bridge, what do you think the biggest kind of change in the ecosystem that you saw since you launched your company?
I think first it's a more mature ecosystem, much more. I mean, when I started my company, I wanted to pitch for some VCs. I think there was at most 5 VCs investing in Mexico. Well, in general, and they had like so little money. I mean, probably their funds were like $50 million each.
Yeah.
And if you look now at the size of the funds and the number of funds in Mexico, at least, you have like funds that are 10 times bigger. So it's a 10x, no? I would say like 15 years. That's one thing. And the other thing, I think there's a lot more knowledge within entrepreneurs to how to build a scalable company. I didn't know what I was doing at the beginning with my company. There was not much knowledge about it. And now you see a lot of people that are really clever on how to pitch VCs and how to do scalable businesses, second-time entrepreneurs. So it's a completely different ecosystem.
Let's just briefly kind of touch on Bridge, and then we'll kind of get into this interesting trend that I think you're following very closely with this e-commerce through WhatsApp. But with Bridge, basically the 10 of you came together, all current and former founders, and said, we want to do something a little different, which at the time was never happening, right, in Mexico. Give me a little bit about what you guys like investing in, the thesis overall, and what are you looking at most currently?
Yeah, I think that's a good stat. I think I was seeing this stat the other day. 60% of VC funds in the US have at least one partner that was an operator before.
Yeah.
And in Latam, I would say like
10%?
10% or less of the funds have this kind of thing. So that's the differentiator in Bridge. Other thing that it's really important for investing in Latam is you don't have the same profoundness of capital markets. So liquidity is not so easy as it's in the US in general. So for us, you have to invest super early. So our thesis is investing in pre-seed and seed and have the optionality to start getting our money out in Series Bs. So in that sense, you can have, can return the fund to the investors and then have a little bit of upside or the half of the upside for following rounds, the pressure to get the money back or have, the DPIs in general. So that's one thing. We love also to invest in second-time founders, but we also have invested in first-time founders with a lot of experience. We are agnostic, but we have invested more in probably like SaaS, a little bit of SaaS businesses, fintech, and we love enabled AI also. That's probably like 80% of our portfolio, I'll say. But in general, it's all about the founder.
Okay, so let's kind of move on to where you see AI with enablement in WhatsApp. I was reading a few of your guys' posts for Bridge Latam in later 2024, and you guys kind of had this highlighted underutilized platform through AI-driven commerce. Why do you think this is a unique opportunity?
Yeah, of course. Let me tell you this framework that we have to understand AI in Latam. You can divide the AI world into 4 buckets. The first one would be about all the hard things. Like developing chips and everything. And I think Latam is not going to play a really important role, probably only in probably some factories in Mexico are energy production, but not for VC investment. So we don't think that's going to happen. Then you have like the second layer that is more like the foundational models, LLMs and everything. We don't think as well that Latam is going to play a really important role. We think this is more probably for the US and probably China are going to be playing both those roles. Then you have a third bucket in which you have a lot of companies pitching us. That is, lawyers with AI, accountants with AI, or whatever with AI. And this bucket, it's pretty difficult. We think like 99% of companies are going to go bankrupt and they're not going to work. I think a lot of them are taking advantage of the AI world to fundraise, but they don't really are solving a foundational problem.
Yeah, and that's why you think they'll fail, just solely because it's not a foundational essential issue.
Exactly.
It's a nice to have.
Exactly. It's a nice to have, and it's not really a really difficult thing that they're solving. And then there are these guys, and the fourth bucket, that is the value layer or the value bucket. And in that bucket, what we see is people that are not necessarily naming their company AI or saying anything about AI. They're just saying, I can do this thing with 2% of the money, like 3 times better. That's it. And we love those ones. And that's when, like the WhatsApp and AI combination start getting interesting in Latam. We think WhatsApp is like the operational system of Latin America. Everyone communicates through WhatsApp. I think probably 95% of penetration in mobile, something like that. It's crazy. And then, so when you use WhatsApp and then use it as a distribution place and create a value proposition, then we think there's a lot of opportunities. And let me give you 2 examples that we really like. First is this company that we invested in called Darwin AI. So what this guy said is, okay, there's this repetitive work in the sales industry, in some industries like car agencies or real estate, in which you all the time are saying the same things to your clients, like amount of square feet or square meters or give me the, like how the house will look or the apartment or whatever. So they said, instead of having real humans answering you this through WhatsApp, why don't we generate these agents in which they answer all of these things to the humans? Humans probably don't know they're, AI agents. And then when things they get more into the buying part or the closing part of the funnel, then give that to a human. So these agents in Darwin generates all these conversations, and then suddenly they say, okay, I'm going to pass this information to my sales director.
Yeah.
And then, so the sales director through WhatsApp receives all the information of the conversation that it has having with the AI agent, and they just close the deal. So what happens if you are a real estate company, instead of having 20 salespeople, now you need 2. You need the 2 ones that are the best ones to close the deals. And then agents are much, much better because they don't have to go and look into the house again to remember if there were 2 or 3 bedrooms. They just know everything because they're having in that database. So they are super efficient. So these guys are 2 times more efficient. And then they are costing like 10% of what humans were costing before. So that's a really cool example. The second example I would say it's a company called Canvas AI. So in the low skill workers, if you want to hire someone for serving stuff at a restaurant or helping you with cleaning at a hotel, it's not about, like the quality, it's more about quantity. You need a lot of people into the funnel, and then probably 2 or 3 of them we're going to accept the job. So what happened is recruiters, what they do now is go into these pages, Indeed or OCC Mundial, this is a local one, and then they look into the CVs, they look into the profiles, and after a while, they look into the number and they call and then do, an appointment. This took like probably 2 weeks for a recruiter to do. What this guy did is like, okay, I'm going to do a campaign through social media for people that need jobs. I'm going to back check this with the, open sources of the Mexican government. So all the things that they are saying, I can corroborate if they are correct. And then I have this guy has a database of probably 100,000 people just in Mexico City. So the recruiter now, what it does is it sends a voice message through WhatsApp and says, okay, I need 5 cleaning people for this hotel for tomorrow. And then he says, these are the best 10 curriculums. Are you okay? Do you need an appointment for them for tomorrow at that time? Yes, that's okay. So what this guy did in 2 weeks, now it does it in 5 minutes, and it does it for, again, 10% of the cost. Mm-hmm. So those things are the things that when you combine the distribution of WhatsApp and then the AI things, but for actually solving things at a much faster rate, and then with a lower cost, that's what we love in Latam.
And it's so interesting when you say those 2 examples, one might not understand the complexities of situation where, if a family friend has a restaurant, they're trying to hire, or these hostess leave and then they're put their CV in and they don't even need the job anymore. And there's just so much turnover that you're always struggling. And I think this use case you mentioned is very, very applicable to kind of this constant turn. You just have all this churn of employees, and then you're wasting time interviewing.
Yeah, I think the average time of people staying in these jobs are 4 months. And in a restaurant, it loses revenue because it doesn't have someone to serve. So it's a really important thing to solve.
Yes. Do you think this is a common viewpoint? So you guys have been very specific where you see the value within this AI ecosystem in LATAM. Do you think other investors are seeing it this way, or are they maybe chasing more of the headlines that are covered in the US with foundational models and application layer?
I think, we have seen some companies pitching us, some kind of foundational, not necessarily foundational models, but probably like a orchestration of foundational models, I would say. I think in general, like these investors are pretty clever, and I think they will not fall into this kind of companies in general. But probably in the third bucket that we were talking about, this more AI like shining object space, I think probably some VCs are falling into this, because there are some companies that just sound great, but then you see it like what they are solving, I am not really sure.
Yeah, they sound great until who's going to pay?
Exactly. And the B2B sales business in Latam is super difficult.
Yeah. Going off the WhatsApp kind of theme, I put this question in here. I thought it was pretty interesting. Just, Meta obviously is always changing its prices with their API. They did it a few times, I think in 2018, and again recently in 2023. Do you think this could cause some friction or challenge for these true applications that are like embedded within WhatsApp with AI, or do you think that's not too much of a concern?
No, I think it is, because at the end of you are depending on, on someone else's platform. And if this platform change the rules, then it's a risky business. And some people will argue like, okay, yeah, but also like if you are developing an Android or iOS, there are only 2 platforms and they change the rules. But if you look at these companies, have been like really stable in general. Their policies haven't changed a lot. They are stable companies. Meta doesn't have, the fame of being a stable company and having the rules don't change a lot. They're changing all the time, the rules. So actually there are like really big AI businesses through WhatsApp, and some big investors from the US don't invest in these companies just because they depend on a Meta platform. So I think it's an important thing. And then there's a second part of this. I think there's a lot of opportunity on building payments, or even a whole bank, what called a conversational neobank, in which everything you do it through WhatsApp. It would be great. I would love that.
Well, I think of WeChat. That app does everything. And who's to say that Meta might not end up doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I love the idea of, instead of, getting into your app of your bank and then adding a new account, sending the money to your mobile wallet, send a voice note and say like, please send like $500 to my mom, now, or pay that thing or whatever.
Transfer 2,000 pesos for my dog's food to my wife. Great.
Yeah, I think that UX, it's a game changer. You will never go back.
100%. You would never leave.
You'll never go back to an app. That's it. Okay, then going back to your original question. So I think developing this payment platform or these interfaces through WhatsApp, it's difficult because they're gonna want to have a piece of the pie. I have seen a lot of companies, not the neobank part, but a lot of companies trying to develop this payment part. There's a company that started like this in Colombia that is called OnePay. Really interesting. They developed kind of a thing for going out and then coming in, but you're paying through WhatsApp. And we were always like, okay, but at some point, if you're super big, Meta is gonna, want some pie of this. And it's not so easy. And then you also start getting with the problems of, governments. If you're talking about payments, they want to understand what is going on in that space. So it's a difficult one, but I think there's a huge opportunity. Someone is gonna do this conversational neobank.
And you didn't hint on it, but it goes into this, this classic like feature versus company. What's proprietary? If one day there's this decision from Meta that says, no, we're going to charge our fees for the API call to this. And now all of a sudden, what do you do?
That's a great question. It's super difficult to understand in the AI world. What are your moats? The only thing that for me has made sense is there's a great article that compares water in the 80s, the water industry, and the AI industry today. And what they say is like, water is a commodity. If it's a commodity, why there are so many brands now today that are like super profitable just selling you water? No, it doesn't make sense if you think about it.
Fiji, Essentia.
Exactly.
At the airport, $5 water. I'm like, oh yeah, it looks good.
Correct. What? It's water. And what they're saying is like intelligence is being commoditized. You have access to the whole intelligence through AI. So if we compare and we believe that it's going to be commoditized as water, the intelligence, then why water or these brands came to be a big brands? And they say because of two things, distribution and brand. So I believe that's the way to go. I think it's not a technical thing. If people are, like pitching us a company and we have developed the best orchestration with probably, OpenAI is going to do this in 2 months or whatever. But if these guys are saying, I'm going to using these tools, but I'm the best at selling and distribution, I already have a lot of clients and I'm going to scale this way. And I'm building this really beautiful plan in which everyone, when he's talking about AI in Latam, they're thinking about us.
Yeah.
That's the way to go. That's in our perspective. So you build, and it's a kind of difficult mode, but you build a mode through distribution and through brand in AI.
And do you think when you look at the largest players within the financial services here, do you think they're going to compete in this space, or it's just going to be what it's always been? Traditional players stay away from this AI boom.
I think it's pretty difficult for the traditional players. It's like kind of innovation dilemma 101, in which they have to kill their own business to generate a new one. And we're working with this, internal founder trying to develop this idea of the neobank, because we were really into the conversational neobank. And then we were trying to go with the banks and saying probably the first way to go to develop this is actually selling a white label business to the banks, in which now you can do all your BBA or Santa payments through this WhatsApp. And we were selling more as SaaS or trying to get a percentage of the transactions, but pretty difficult because the banks didn't want to do it. Impossible. Conversations with the bank, they were not thinking about it. They generate so much revenue and more in Mexico that for them it's just like a fixture. I think there's going to be a really interesting opportunity for new banks or new people building on top of this.
Okay, but let's kind of transition now into you're not as always open about the creator economy, but I think it's so intriguing. We were talking before we started about I think we saw a VC fund, I forgot the name, that just recently raised a $50 million fund just for the creator economy. Which
Flow Ventures, right?
Flow Ventures, yes. And I was like, wow, this is intriguing. I don't have too many thoughts yet on it. I haven't formulated an opinion, but you did build a very prominent media company here very recently. So I think it'd be fun to kind of chat about the creator economy. I think at one point someone said Gen Z, 70% of them want to be creators.
I think this goes back to a profound change in the society worldwide. And I think people probably 20 years ago were more believers of institutions. And because of social media, we have polarized a lot, like the institutional trust. And now we trust more individuals than institutions. And that change is a super profound change in society. And let me give you two examples. First is probably like Lionel Messi, no? So everyone loves Messi, and probably when it was in Barcelona, there's people that were just in Barcelona because of Lionel Messi. And now if you go into Inter de Miami where he's playing, it's about Messi. It's not about Inter de Miami. So and that had never happened before, because before social media and everything, it was more about the teams, the institutions, not the single players. Another big one, it's if you talk about Trump, like Trump is now bigger than like the Republican Party. I think these two examples, it's a perfect example of how we have changed our trust from institutions to individuals. Really scary and risky thing. But anyways, so you see the same thing in media, like newspapers, local newspapers in different places where the way to go to understand what was happening in media, what was happening in your local place, or even big news corporations, CNN or New York Times. Or now, if you look at those, the trust of these institutions have go down a lot, and then you have this creator economy that is going bigger. So I think that's just an answer for what has happened in the whole society, and there's a really interesting opportunity for building this creator economy companies around those.
But when you were building your media company, if you were to do it over again today, what would you do differently? And what it was, do you think creators would be like your entry point into the market, into your audience, or how do you view that?
We actually took that decision ourselves because at some moment when we were building Cultura Colectiva, we said, okay, we have an option to be creators ourselves. And then we can, use all the power and followers that we have, and we can build our own personal brands. And it was a conscious decision. It was more like a lifestyle decision in the way that, say, like, okay, being a creator, you have to be all the time creating content, and it's like kind of a jail for your own. And we're saying, no, I prefer to build a brand that doesn't depend on myself all the time doing things. So I think it was probably like a clever decision in terms of mental peace or lifestyle.
But I think you made the right one. You made the right decision.
Probably would be much better in terms of financial if we, I mean, you never know if you're going to be successful as a creator. But anyways, so yeah, I think that's, if I was building a new, and I have, questioned myself this like so many times, if I have building a new company today, I don't know. I mean, I think I will try to do, I will start with a newsletter or a podcast, and I will go into a niche audience that is really interesting. And then we're able to do payments or pay subscribers. And I think it's pretty difficult to do this in Latam, and probably it's going to be a super long-term company. But I think that's the most sustainable way to create media nowadays. And in Mexico, you see companies like White Paper, for instance, they have payment days, and I think they're thriving. So I'll try to build that, because if you go into the creator space or trying to do agency of creators, it's impossible. I mean, managing people that can change all the time, it's super difficult. We try to do at some point in Cultura virtual influencers, creating influencers that are, all the way created with AI or whatever. And because of that, you own everything about them. Yeah. But it's also not so easy to create these virtual influencers. The empathic part of
yeah, and the empathic part that you mentioned was, now people like actually prefer content that looks more real and like not so staged. I was talking to my wife about this. So many of the best creators are like ones that are just like walking around and filming and doing things very organically that don't have all this professional equipment. You're like, oh my God, that's the opposite of what AI generated avatars are now. I see startups that are like perfect studios. Are like, dude, no one's gonna watch this.
Yeah, completely.
Let's kind of tie this back into the startup ecosystem. As startups kind of go to market, it's super competitive. There's some arguments out there that a lot of these companies are succeeding or succeed better when there's like some type of brand or personal brand, and we could point to founders that we know and founders in the US that are very prominent. Do you believe a lot of startups, depending on the industry and B2B, B2C, should be building content within their go-to-market strategy, and how important that is in the long run?
So I think it depends a lot. If you're in the B2B space or more the B2B enterprise, I think it makes sense for create a personal brand for the founders, because then it's easier that people already knows you, and then it's easier to the times for getting a client could be lower. So I'll love that part. If you're a B2C brand, definitely you should be creating really cool and different content. And you have a good example with Ben and Frank. They generated such a cool brand with such a differentiator in terms of how they were creating things, that they positioned themselves pretty well into the market. So definitely, everything is about narratives. No,
Yeah.
if you go into the book of Yuval Harari Noah, *Sapiens*, says we tell ourselves stories all day, and then it's only about which ones do we trust or not. But everything everything is an illusion. It's all about the story that we trust ourselves. So being a storyteller is the most powerful tool that you can have in nowadays.
Final thoughts. What challenges do you see in Mexico and Latam founders that are different here than in the US and Europe? And I think, you've been to both places and have spent time extensively.
I think there's a really cool meme in which if you were born in Latam, it's like when you are choosing which level to play a video game, it's like legendary mode.
Send me that meme.
Yeah, it's really, yeah. So I think it's much more difficult to create a startup in Latam because you have to build three things at the same time. So if you want to do a neobank, then you have to do the payment processor, and then you have to generate the credit cards. So it's not one company. You have to create the whole infrastructure for everything. So in that sense, it's more difficult, but then there's another really cool thing, that it's because you build all these things, you are more vertically integrated, and then you have more moats, or you can stay more time as a leader in the industry. So I think that's one thing. The other thing is that capital is more scarce in the region. So it's difficult. It's more difficult to raise funds in the region. So you have to be much clever. So that's another thing that I would say that is different from more developed markets.
Next one is, what would be like one bold bet you'd bet on the ecosystem now in 2025?
What do you mean more in
Yeah. It could, we'll stay with investments, or it could be two-part. It could be kind of the space you would invest in, or just something that maybe others aren't looking at, but just a prediction.
I think we were talking about narratives before, no? And I think like the VC ecosystem in Latam, it's super volatile. Like if you look at 2021, everyone was saying like Latam is a new place to invest in VC, and all the funds in the world were coming here to invest. And then suddenly, no,
gone.
VC doesn't work in Latam. It's done, and nobody's going to invest again in VC. And I think it is neither both. We only understand things through stories as humans. I think there are going to be like really interesting stories coming this year and next year, and they are going to transform the people see the ecosystem. There are going to be IPOs from unicorns, Mexican unicorns, and there's going to be a potential sale of a really interesting company in this year. And if this happens, the narrative is going to change a lot. And suddenly, I think it's going to be exaggerated, but everyone is going to talk about like, okay, Latam again is like a super place to invest.
Yeah. Last question here, and sometimes it's not the easiest to answer, but what's been the biggest mistake? Two parts. First, as an entrepreneur you've made, and then second, as an investor.
I think as an entrepreneur, it's super difficult to don't lose your ground when you raise a lot of money. And I thought, I'm someone that meditates. I'm pretty educated, and I thought, like when I raise a lot of money, the bad things that would happen is like I start buying things or being more presumptions or whatever. But not what happened is I thought that I could create a lot of things in the company, and I was not good at going deep and evaluating what was a good bet. So if I would do a new company again, I would be much more clever about how to use the money.
Yeah.
And like really analyze it, and then doing like the capital efficiency. And I think like second time entrepreneurs understand this, and that's why they are much better. It's only about capital allocation. And as an investor, I think it's pretty difficult to not get in love with the solution instead of the problem. I'm going to put examples. So
yes, give us examples, of course.
Well, as because as an entrepreneur, I'm more biased to be optimistic. No, like if you're not optimistic, you can't be an entrepreneur, because the definition is you think that you can do things better than society has done in the past, and then you have to be an optimistic. So when someone is pitching me, I'm always thinking how this can happen. No, I'm being optimistic. And for me, a couple of investments that we have done in the past, I have got in love a lot with the solution because it's so cool, so interesting, so intellectually, fulfilling. But then don't go so deep in, is this a real deep problem? Is there really solving something that is a game changer or not? So I think that's the biggest mistake, getting in love with the solution instead of the problem.